Welcome to X1T Gaming, and together we're going to revolutionize the gaming industry, one step at a time. So right now we are going back to learning about our level 2 or sorry, our prototype level 1, and now we're just re-editing it to do it a little bit better. So you know how in the last video I was saying when we're going through it, I was just like, oh man, I have to do this. It's kind of mendoxai. Maybe I should edit it. And then now we're going to edit it. I don't know exactly how we're going to do this one, but I think this one is more of a horsepower base. So let's do it. We're going to add forces to our thing.
In this lesson, you'll attempt to add a speedometer and RPM display for your vehicle in Prototype 1. And in doing so, you'll learn the process of doing online research when trying to implement new features and troubleshoot bugs in your projects. As you'll find out, adding a new feature is very rarely as simple as it initially seems. You inevitably run into unexpected complications and errors that usually require a little online research. So in this lesson, we'll learn how to do some online research so that we can do it on our own for our projects. Now, one thing that'll set our driving game apart from our driving simulator is by adding something like a speedometer to be able to actually track the speed of our vehicle, much like you would see in a car itself. If we're going to implement a speedometer, the first thing we have to do is make the vehicle accelerate and decelerate more like a real car, which uses forces as opposed to the translate method. Because of the fact that translate will actually move our vehicle at a constant speed, we'll need to use forces and rigid bodies on our vehicle to make it move at different speeds, by applying different forces onto the vehicle to make it speed up and slow down. So open up your Prototype 1 project, and when Prototype 1 is open, we're going to make a backup of our project because we're going to change some of our code. So in the top left of Unity, go to the Assets dropdown and Export Package. Now I'm going to export this package directly to my Create with Code folder. So I'll call this Prototype 1 Complete. Now I'll make sure to save. So now that we've saved our Prototype 1, if you remember, on our player object, we have this player controller script, which is how we actually move our vehicle through the scene using that translate method. So I need to actually go into my scripts folder and open up player controller. Now in my player controller script, I have the transform.translate method where I move the vehicle, but I need to use physics and forces to do so instead of using transform.translate. So I'm actually going to create a new variable for our rigid body. And now I need to actually assign that rigid body when our game starts. So now in our start method, our player RB variable is set to the rigid body component that we have on our actual vehicle. Now, one thing I want to do is I want to actually comment out the speed because I'm going to create a different variable for applying the actual force. So in case I want to use speed and I want to use this translate method, I'll comment both of those lines out. So instead of speed, I'll make a private float called horsepower, and we'll set that to 0 for now. Since I actually want to interact with this variable, I'm going to add that serialize field attribute. So now I can actually play around with this variable in Unity, even though it's private. And then in my update method, I'm going to use that rigid body. I'm going to apply a force using the add force method. We want to apply that force in the forward direction. We don't actually need to use time.delta time since we're applying forces instead of translating something. I'll multiply it by the horsepower that we have. And then we need to actually control that force, so we'll use vertical input. So this line of code isn't entirely different from our original line. In some of our past projects, we were using add forces to move things. So now is a good opportunity to try using add force again. So I make sure I save. Now in Unity, you can see that my player controller script has updated on the inspector. So I'll select that player, and horsepower is set to 0. So what I'll actually do is I'm going to test out this variable. So I'm going to enter play mode. And we know 0 is not going to move it at all. So let's try like 10, since we had about like 20 before. So we're not really moving, but we can turn still. Let's see, what if I just if we put it to 100, does it move anywhere? No? Okay, maybe we need more force. 1,000? Still nothing. Let's go even more, 10,000. Very little movement. Okay, let's say 20,000. Oh, there you go. So our vehicle moves forward, but doesn't actually move in the direction that we turn it in. So that's frustrating. Let me make sure that I actually set this variable now that I'm out of play mode. And let's try that again, see what happens. Yeah, so the vehicle doesn't move in the right direction at all. It's just always moving forward, which could look really cool if you're making like a drifting game, but we still want to be able to turn that vehicle. So what did we do wrong? To help conceptualize the problem here, so you can see right now we have the arrows for that move tool. And right now, our move tool is actually locked into global coordinates. So we can use this toggle in the top left to switch between global and local. And so now local should actually turn as we turn the vehicle. So with global coordinates set up on our rotation tool, if I actually rotate this vehicle left to right, you can see that it actually is always still pointing down the road. If I switch to local coordinates, you can actually see as I rotate this vehicle, now the arrow is pointing wherever the vehicle points. So we actually need to figure out how we can apply forces according to our local coordinates. Luckily, the internet is our good friend here. So in Google, I actually typed in Unity add force in local space. And you can see all of these different things popped up. There's actually some Unity answers questions here. So this is actually our forum where users go to ask questions, and then other users will actually answer it for them. And then we also have the scripting API. This is actually the official Unity documentation. So you can see here we have that add force method. We know that doesn't work, so let's see. If we click into the topmost result, the question here says add force in local space. And the user asked, how do you change an add force from global to local? The top reply from this user says to add relative force instead of add force. So we were using add force before, but I don't know what this add relative force does. So you can see that the user was trying to point us in the right direction using add relative force. Down in the suggestions for the scripting API, add relative force is actually one of the options that we can select as a result, or we can ask Google once again. So Unity add relative force. So this actually brings up that result for our documentation. So you can see in our official documentation, the description tells us that it adds a force to the rigid body relative to its coordinate system. So it actually is using that local coordinate system. So if I go to my player controller script, if I go down to my update method, if I just add the word relative to add force, I can save, and then I head back into Unity and I test my game out in play mode. See, as I turn, I should be moving in the direction the vehicle is pointing. So see, that works. Our vehicle is doing some weird things at the moment. That's fine. We'll fix that in a bit. Oh, we just flipped over. But on the upside, our vehicle isn't just driving straight down the road as I turn. So using a little bit of searching on the internet and finding the add relative force method, I was able to fix the problem that I had. So what you're going to do is you're going to open up Prototype 1. In the top left of Unity, if you select the Assets menu option, go down to Export Package. You're going to export a new package to save as a backup for your Prototype 1, since we're going to change it. You're then going to open up your player controller script. In your player controller script, you can comment out the variable for your speed, and you can comment out the line where we are moving the vehicle using transform.translate. I added a new variable for our horsepower that will be applied as a force. I used that new attribute serialize field so that I can actually change this value in Unity. I needed to make a new variable for our rigid body, and then I needed to assign.
Okay, so yeah, it kind of works, but now we got to prevent car from flipping over. I think we might do that tomorrow. I'm a little bit tired, but we do a little bit every day at least, at the minimum. And yeah, short video today. Had the day off, so we had a long day playing with kids. Yeah, so baby steps, learn a little bit every day. I'll try to do a little bit more tomorrow. That was a little bit complicated. Not really complicated. It was pretty much the same thing. It was definitely good advice to go through. It was a little bit boring telling him how to teach, getting him teaching you how to use Google, Google Sensei. But yeah, so goodbye for now. I will catch you again tomorrow at 9 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. You guys have a good one.